Hey, what's up, Dean? How you doing, Marco? Yeah, Mike is coming through good. What's up, Ben? Thanks for joining in. Okay, I think I'm gonna just get started, given the run through. I don't know if people saw what I had originally posted about, where I kind of wanted to focus still a little bit more on mixing, and I really just want to go through tracks. Anything that's pertaining to mixing, I want to go through tracks that I worked through, that I struggled with, and just kind of the process of what I dealt with, what I struggled with, the things that I learned from it. And I mean, the funny thing is that it took me, I played this track out a lot before I ever felt really comfortable with it. And the funny thing is once you kind of get in that mindset of that you've struggled with the track, I was always kind of insecure about how this track sounded, even when I'd play it in clubs and whatnot. I always am a little bit self-conscious of my own productions and maybe a little bit perfectionist. And I always feel like, oh, this track compared to, because then the tricky thing about making dance music is it's being built for DJs and clubs. And so you're literally always, when you play a track in a club, it's always being compared to two tracks. It's being compared to the track before and the track after that you play. And when you're doing your own stuff, I think it's a pretty common thing to always think that your track's a little bit lacking, and that's just part of the process. So the way I can remember how I started this track, because I had the bass tape. This was when I had first upgraded to Ableton Live version 10, and this was one of the things I was the most excited about, and I still am the most excited about with Ableton version 10, is the wavetable synth. And so I just was playing around with it, and I think if I'm looking at the pattern of this, I think, and we talked about this in the last workshop, just like running a drum pattern over the top with a synth, maybe a drum pattern that you're stuck on or you're not really inspired by it, just take that MIDI clip and just throw it onto a synth. Put it on a completely different sound and see what happens with it. And so I remember the track started with this. And as you can see, the funny thing is, I was literally just testing out all the new plugins in the track, or in Ableton 10. So I've got Wavetable, which was a new introduction. I've got the echo effect, which was a new thing in Live 10. And then I've got the pedal here. And yeah, and it's funny, I'm already seeing things that I would have done a little bit differently. First off, I would have brought this volume down. I would have gotten, let's see how, like sometimes if it's going into the red a little bit, which wasn't really the end of the world. Hey Fabio, hey Tommaso, hey Drew, how are you all doing? Just going through this track Neverends for those of you who have joined. Someone want to post the link to the video Neverends? The people at front left did a really good job with the video, and obviously just another opportunity for Ozzy to be more famous than me. But the Ozzy video has my track playing in the background, let's just say, and it's this track. So what I would have done, first off, this is like already kind of pushing it. It's clipping, so I would drop this down. I'm gonna take it down 6 dB. And I'm gonna make up for that right here. So someone had talked about gain staging, and that was an example of bad gain staging on my end. So this was the first track that I did. I started out just really basic with yeah, that was the first part of the track that I can clearly remember. And as soon as if I put a kick drum over it, let's see. That kick drum's already like, the bass is already going crazy here. And I needed to have the bass kind of cleared out to make way for the kick. And this isn't really, to me, this isn't like a bass line per se, so you could sacrifice a little bit more on the EQing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that video. That has the finished track in it. But yeah, it was already starting to crowd, so let's just go with these two. Yeah, now if I take out that EQ, it starts causing a little bit of problems. Let's get this compressor on it. Something that I would change that to, I'd change that to RMS to avoid the clicking. Years and years of using it, I never knew that the RMS would actually remove the clicking when you sidechain compress stuff. Fabio, you totally can load your own samples into it. Check it out. So, yeah, it's you would go to. Hello, Heather from Nice. Good to see you. Fabio, real quick on the wavetable, what you can do is you can have the user, and then just it will prompt you to drop the sample right in. And when you do that, you can take any sample that you want. So let's take this and drop it in, and then you've got something different. But yeah. So, okay, back to this. We've got a little bit of sidechain compression on it. I've got the low end rolled off. I added the pedal because I wanted it to be a little bit dirtier. Let's go just here. Yeah, Fabio, you gotta try the user option, and that's it. Yeah. Zakaria, good evening to you as well. Okay. Hello, Piotr. Good to see you. I loaded up the track you sent. It worked great. So I'm gonna figure out how to. Those of you who are just here right now, I'm starting to have people submit tracks that they have like a specific issue on that they're working on, and I want to start in these workshops. I want to have the ability to pull up other people's Ableton sessions and kind of do what I'm doing with my own track of saying like, here's what I'd do differently, here's what I'm doing here, here's my thought process, and I'm gonna try to answer the question that people have about their own tracks that they're working on, and I'm gonna try to pull up the Ableton session. So there's a few hiccups, like I need to have all the same plugins that the people submitting the tracks have, and we've had a few hiccups with that, but I think it's gonna work out. So let me know, send me a message if you've got tracks that you're working on, that you're stuck on something, and I'll kind of decide on who's got a question that might be useful for the whole class or the whole workshop, and then I can get the session from you and we can pull it up and see what happens. Might work, might not, we'll see. But I'm optimistic. Let's see, so I've got the EQ8, I've got the low end rolled off right around 88 Hertz is where the low pass is, or the high pass. And the reason I have it set there is like the kick drum really needs it's a pretty heavy kick. Well, it's filtered right now, so that part's not really heavy. But yeah. So, and that's, I also pulled up the drum bus on this. I've got the boom set to like 25. Yeah. And I wanted to carve out space with that, so I have, let's get this soloed as well. Okay. And again, added the pedal just to get a little bit of very basic amounts of fuzz. I got it at 28%. But I like the fuzzy top end on it. And then I moved back and I wanted it to be a little bit crazier. So I'm actually sweeping through the track on the top end. You can see where the automation is here. I'm basically manually doing all that as I'm recording in the session. And yeah, then the next thing was, or the first thing that I put in, I'm kind of working backwards and adding stuff back in. I had the echo delay. Okay. So the sweeping, where I've got that really sharp boost at the top, it's kind of making the rhythm kind of modulate throughout the track, because I just felt like if you just had it set like that, it just wouldn't have that same action to it. Is everybody following along? Okay, Fabio. Noted. Yeah, I've got a lot of the Waves plugins, and actually, but I'm using a computer that I'm on the first operating system that Apple has released that no longer supports 32-bit anything. So anything that's not 64-bit, it won't work on here. So that might have been a big problem. And not only does it not work, it like really rubs it in your face that it doesn't work. So yeah, that kind of starts with we've got the bass here, and then I struggled with this because this is just kind of the top end, and I thought, okay, it's still like not creating a real bass line yet, and I didn't want to really heavily process let's see what I did. Let me make sure before, yeah. So if I'm guessing, I'm gonna guess what I did. pitched it down somewhere. Let's see what this is. Fold C4. Actually, I think what I really just did was I used the same plugin. I just duplicated it, and the difference is I had basically the same processing, but I just wanted to beef up the low end, and that is what I do here. So if I turn that off, it's basically the same-ish plugin that I was using for the bass line. So actually, these two are effectively the same, but I just wanted to sculpt the low end and kind of thicken it up. So I duplicated it and did a little bit of different EQing. I might have done actually a little bit of different setup on no, everything's pretty much the same. So what I'll do here is I'll bring this down. And I'm going to bring up this here. So what I had done, I'm looking back retroactively, and I saw that the synth was kind of already touching the red right down here. So I backed off on the synth volume 6 dB, and I just boosted it on the fader 6 dB, give or take. So let's see how it sounds now with just these. Let me make sure that I've got the I would probably actually, the way I'm hearing it on these Behringer headphones, or not Behringer, Bear Dynamic, big difference. Yeah, I would have. This was really the area that I struggled with. Was I never knew, I could never, with the room I was in, I listened on 2 or 3 different headphones and was trying to get this level perfect. And it always just felt like a lot of times you're gonna render tracks and it's gonna sound perfect when you go to render, and then as soon as you play it back, you're like, that bass sound sounds like 3 dB too loud. And it's just it can be super frustrating. And know that everybody struggles with that, and you're not alone in that process. And so you'll mess around with that, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, I think I can show you just how many versions I did of this track. Let's see. I think we can see. We'll be able to pull up. Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah. So there's a lot of Ableton sessions going on with this Neverends track. And yeah, you can see just all the headache that was going into this. So that's a great thing about software, is you can make as many versions and you can revisit. But one of the worst things about software is that you can make infinite amount of versions, and if you're not careful, you'll never just pull the trigger and you'll end up never releasing anything. So that said, let's see let me go to the comments real quick. What's up, Bobby? Thomas, how are you doing? Thomas, that is a map of, it has Yugoslavia down in the corner, so it's probably I mean, that kind of gives you a specific time frame of when this map is from, but it's southern Germany, and the very top end of the map is, you can see Berlin at the very top part, but mostly southern Germany, a little bit of Switzerland, a little bit of Austria, and Yugoslavia is just, Hungary's down there too. That's the answer to that question. So this is, any other question? Do you have any other issues with clipping or some glitches when using automation to turn on off a plugin or filter band for an EQ? Not sure if that's only my sound card or if it would be in the mix down too. Good evening, Reconnect. Fabio, yes, in short. And something I started doing instead of turning off and on, like the auto filter, because there is that popping sound that you'll get. What I've started doing is leaving the auto filter engaged, but I'll actually drop the envelope all the way down. So let me just show you. I kind of set the filter of the frequency that I would be most prone to use. I've talked about it before. I love the MS-20 setting, or MS2. It's emulating an MS-20, but didn't want Korg's lawyer showing up at Ableton's door. So you have this envelope, and when it's fully turned down, you're all good. And then, so like you don't have any of that click. Whereas if you actually, now I haven't used the on-off automation recently, and it seems like the more recent versions of Ableton have gotten rid of that, but that used to be a real issue. So yeah. Drew, Stuttgart is on the map as well. Yep. By the way, I have to say, just a side note, for me, the Schwabian Essen, the Schwabian cuisine, that really is the best food in all of Germany. I'm sorry for the people from Bavaria, but like a lot of the Bavarian stuff is more Austrian than Bavarian anyways. And for me, the most interesting German food is in the Baden-Württemberg region. Schwabisch. Is it Schwabisch or Schwabian? Schwabian. Okay, anyways, I digress. Welcome, Fabio. You feel personally attacked, Ben? We can fix that problem. That's a problem that can definitely be fixed. Okay, and you'll always see, if you ever see a session of mine, you'll see like, I'm kind of a messy producer in that I never delete tracks, I just mute them, which if I've been away from a session for a long time, that can cause a headache, because then I don't remember if it was muted because I didn't like it or if it was muted because it just was at that time when I saved it. But I tend, if your processor allows for it, I keep sounds there, because then it's nice to kind of, okay, now I've got 3 different bass options, and I can kind of punch in and punch out those different sounds and see kind of what works and what doesn't after the fact. So, yeah. Let me just make sure that all the stuff is in order. Oh. That's what I needed. So I'm just gonna pull up the old session because I think I might have messed up some of the tracks, so don't save. Now I'll just pull it up so that we still have the original version that we're working with. Any questions while this is pulling up? Good evening, Mr. Reconnect. Good to see you. There we go. Yep. So that's kind of the finished product that I had with the kick and the bass going on. This was not. I probably would have actually just taken that out. Sometimes you keep these sounds in and you're like, why do I have this sound if I don't really hear it after the fact? It's just gonna crowd the mix. So it doesn't add anything, it just adds clutter. So, yep, could've, should've, would've, but that's okay. So the next part of the track, let's see what it is. Up, another wavetable. More echo. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this track just really came about by, I just wanted to test all the new features on Ableton 10. I specifically remember that. So what I have here is I've got one synth. It's very super basic. I think it's one note. Yep. And I wanted to have something else that's kind of like a noise floor. So it's a duplicated synth, but just way more rinsed out with, I've got all kinds of different little doodads here. This is just a little EQ plugin, a reverb from D16 Group. And I wanted to really rinse it out, but I don't want to, I find that it sounds a little bit better if you're like stacking reverbs. If it's possible to use different reverbs on top of each other, it just gels a little bit better. Could be completely placebo, but I don't know. Yeah, and I played around with creating, like, you can create stereo width with different plugins. You can use the utility plugin for this. And I played around with this. That would be mono. That's like hyper stereo. I ended up not doing it because I thought that it kind of, the feeling kind of got lost there. But yeah, this is really just like to add some texture. Okay, we'll go back in the mix. Okay. This is actually a piece of hardware that I used. And I'm running, I'm also running this like kind of similar signal chain. Whenever I start a track, I'm like just setting the automation to kind of keep the track moving so I can stay inspired by it. And then I'll go back and kind of set in the actual automation that I want. But if I turn off all this stuff, that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Love you too, Basti. How you doing? Did you hear what I said about Schwabian food? Gave you a little shout out. So that's what it sounds like with no processing on it, and obviously needed to be cleaned up a little bit. And yeah. So you can when I record hardware, I'm always keeping the MIDI notation on the hardware. Something else that if I was more organized, sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. I would actually recommend, and I didn't do it here because I was just jamming about, but rename the MIDI, the hardware synth that it was, and also list the patch, save the patch and list the patch there so that you can always recall it if you need to have anything adjusted. So, okay, now let's go back to Z top, or not quite to the top. Any questions while this is playing out? Yeah, Fabio, that's kind of what I was getting at with adding too much like artificial stereo field. And to answer your question, I would imagine it's a running joke that I have with some friends. It's a very nerdy joke, but I'm like always, I have all these Waves plugins that used to be just like super badass, and I'm not using hardly any of them anymore. So I'm having to look to see if I've got that plugin. And it would appear that I do have that plugin. Let's see. Where's it at? Yep. Spread stereo. Let's see what it does if I put it on there. But like I said, I'm super nervous about stuff like that. Oh, this is one of the old guys. It's not too drastic. Yeah, you can start to see things that are like, yeah. There's a lot better stereo spread options that you can get. And honestly, this plugin, by the looks of it from Waves, this was made probably in the 90s or at the very latest early 2000s. So you can imagine how many better options there are than this now. but that's just my 2 cents. What hardware synth did I use? This is my favorite, not my favorite hardware synth that I have, but if someone's wanting to get into understanding hardware and synthesis, I would say one of the least intimidating synths that you can buy, and it's super cheap. You can get them used for really cheap. It's the Nord Rack 2. If someone wants to post a photo of a Nord Rack 2 in the comments, that would be great. The reason I like the Nord Rack 2, which is what this sound is right here. It's a Nord Rack 2 that's running through a guitar pedal distortion. And the reason I like the Nord Rack 2, and I always recommend it to new producers, is when you buy hardware, you run the risk of never being able to, it's not like software where you can kind of go through the presets and then look at the knobs and see what's been done and all that. It's a little bit less intuitive in my opinion. But the nice thing about the Nord Rack 2 is that there is pretty much a knob per function. And what I mean by that is a lot of times thank you, Spas. The thing that a lot of synthesizers have is they require you to go through menus to get to different parts of the synth. And that's a real pain to me. And you can there's very interesting stuff like this synth right here. Hopefully I don't drop it on my computer. But this is I really like this synth, very underrated synth. It's the Waldorf Blofeld. And the thing is that I wouldn't recommend this for a new producer because there's only 4 knobs and you're basically having to scroll through all these buttons to get to all these different functions, and it just can be a little bit intimidating and all that. But the synth itself makes incredible sounds. So, but I would say the Nord Rack 2 is one of the easiest synths for you to learn how to use. So, yeah. Let's see. Do I have any instances of multiband compression going on? I still struggle with using that tool properly. Drew, truth be told, I struggle with multiband compression as well. And there's people that I know that use multiband compression and they use it in a way that just brings the track to life. But in my experience, multiband compression, it becomes very clear and apparent when you don't know what you're doing with multiband compression. And I've used it at times, but I rarely get the track to sound better because of it. But that's just me, but I would not be a really good person to teach multiband compression. I've just never found one. I've heard really good things about the FabFilter one, and the FabFilter compressor is something that you can really easily wrap your mind around because it's so visual. But yeah. Ben Perry, it took me 4 years to realize that the Waves, SSL, Bus Comp, H Comp, and API don't work in Ableton under the audio units format. So they were fancy gain knobs. They really don't work in the audio unit format? That can't be. Really? Is that the case? I'll have to check that out later. Okay. Good tip. Mikhail Stereo Savage from Plugin Alliance is great. Kian, there's your answer. That's good insight, Drew. Split your sound into 2-chain, mono one, and then widen the other, and do some fun stuff with mid-side EQ or compression and saturation. Thanks for that answer, Drew. Any questions? Any other questions? Yeah, so I mean, you're really looking at a track that effectively super basic drum pattern that I just kind of added a little bit of my own processing on it. But that's it. I would probably maybe turn that down a little bit. One thing I would say, and this is something that I struggled with in the past, is in this, you're gonna notice muddy bass a lot more than you're gonna notice muddy highs, but you have to clear space for highs just as much as you have to clear space for bass. You're just not gonna notice it as much, but it's super important that things have their space. And when you add things like different plugins that add these like high-end artifacts or like high frequency artifacts on it, and I wouldn't say, you have to just be careful to make sure you're not layering so many high sounds that everything becomes like kind of cloudy and muffled up there. So it's like a little weird counterintuitive that the highs become more defined when you're not like spiking the high frequencies. So glad you've had a great morning, Drew. Glad that this is a good part of your day. So, Drew, where are you from? Where's everybody from, by the way? I'm always interested in where people are tuning in, live and direct. So yeah, there's the drum machine, and then we've got this is one open hi-hat. But if you pay attention to what I'm doing here, I'm messing around with the velocity. I'm messing around with where things hit. You can kind of see here. I mean, for me, I'm listening to this and I could totally make a whole track based around this hi-hat pattern. One thing you gotta watch is like these like uncomfortable resonances, especially if you've got a lot of processing on hi-hats. They can get really hissy really fast. So that's why I notched out some of these parameters here. Sophia, man, we've got people from all over the world. Orange County, California. You know, Orange County was like, I forget, there was some fast food restaurant that my friend would always go. There was like the only one of those in like the whole Los Angeles area, but can't remember. Anyways, LA, Drew's from LA. Yep. How many channels total am I using in this track? Alex Bao, what's up? Why don't you start a course on how to produce the right track for Credo? Alex, I don't know if I've ever made the right track for Credo. Alex is a good friend of mine, and has been a longtime friend in the business, super humble, modest guy that I think really gets techno on a philosophical and artistic level, and it's been at it for probably about 25 years now. So good to see you, Alex. But yeah, maybe it's time to bust out the Credo vibes again. I still play my stuff on Credo. I enjoy it. It's not all the time that I'm happy with my tracks after that. How many channels total are you using in this track? Realistically, let's count them up. 1, because that's all MIDI and I'm not using that. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 tracks is all this track is. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's different if you're routing every drum sound separately in the mix, but if you think about it, like, most music has like, unless you're doing like a symphony, most music has like 5 or so parts to it, you know? Unless you're Leonard Skinner, and then it's like, I think 9 parts or something. Or Slipknot. They had a lot of, I don't know how I know that. I don't know if I could name a single Slipknot song. But yeah, most music you're listening to has only a few key parts, and I'm generally not adding a lot of, I try to reduce the clutter, because like, if you can't, I mean, this is you could get 20 different producers to give 20 different answers on this, but I do feel like there is something about if you can't say what you need to say, like, people are gonna walk away from a track and they're gonna have something, like, I've never had somebody come up to me and say, hey, I love this track because of these 5 parts. They're always like, oh, I love the track because it's got a crazy synth, or I love the kick drum on this track. It's like super basic. And the thing is like, find really strong key elements in a track, and then the need to add a bunch of stuff on it becomes a lot less, in my opinion. So that's my thing. So Sofia, Bulgaria, Spas. I once saw Risto Stoichkov play in the World Cup. That was a highlight for me. Greetings from Vienna, Nice, France here. Heather in the house. Do you generally incorporate swing into your hats? I love swing. Let me show you what I did in this though. You'll notice that there's no groove here, but I'm basically building in my own groove here. I'll like draw a note. Yeah, that's not good, but so yeah, you've got like a proper swing going there. So let me just take that off because I was just demonstrating that. But yeah, I sometimes manually will enter in my own swing into stuff. So that's the answer to that. Belgium in the house. Does hat sound crisp? Thank you. Rob Acid mentioned those in a studio talk, getting rid of the harshness of the hat. Rob Acid is a studio genius. So if you've never heard of Rob Acid's music, you should go listen to it because it's really good music. And I feel like it's that kind of music is actually probably pretty in fashion right now. And he was doing it before it had this second wave. And yeah, Robert Babitz is the name of Rob Acid. He's just a really smart guy in the studio, and he's always kind of lurking on these forums. I learned a lot from Rob Acid. I don't think I've ever met Rob Acid, but I've learned a lot from him because he was always on the message boards and he was always posting pictures of his crazy studio and stuff. Yeah. Great producer. I think actually I was in Malta and he lives in Malta now, which I've got to say, Malta's pretty awesome. So, yeah. Colombia, Moscow. Thanks, Alex. Marco, I agree. She lived in the U.S. and Mexico, in Mexico City for 15 years before coming back here. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, Spaß, it didn't get, I think that another Risto Stoichkov is going to be hard to come by. Okay. Super, like, let me go as far as saying, like, really lazy 16th note hi-hats. But this is, for me, this is like kind of highlights a little bit of my philosophy. Like this is something like this whole track basically came about in 2 hours. And I'll go back to the advice that Dustin Zahn gave, where he said to like separate your processes in the studio, which I think is good advice. Because like I could have really lost the feel of this track if I would have spent like hours looking for the perfect close hi-hat that's really like not even, I wanted it not even like super high up in the mix. And there's so much already going on there. Like, it's really not a key element. And so I'm okay with calling that aspect lazy. Like the non-lazy parts were like the patch with the Waldorf, or not Waldorf, Nord Rack 2, and getting the bass and the kick to go together, and I spent hours building just the bass and the kick rhythm. But that whole idea of it, I just threw together in 2 hours and then kind of went back and deconstructed the things that I needed to. Yeah. So I think that is actually all of the elements of it. But I just want to reiterate that I really struggled with the mix down of this track. I did tons and tons of mix downs. So let me start it from the beginning. I'm gonna play this whole track from start to finish, and then we can feel free to ask questions as they come in, and then I'll answer them when it's done. Oh, here's a funny part about this track. That little hit right there was a complete, I'm gonna play it again. That was a complete accident. I just copied and pasted the wrong part of the track into that and it sounded kind of fun, so kept it. Okay. I mean, no one needs to listen to this for 6 minutes. But someone had asked, Drew, that's awesome. That's a good memory about the Louisville Christmas party. That was a lot of fun. If you hear from Trevor, tell him I said hi and miss him. That was nice, proper Louisville party, and some nice bourbon was there. I remember it being like a bring your own alcohol type party. That was fun. So the kick, I think someone asked about the kick. Which one do I got? It was let's pull this up. It's kick 2. I'm using the daylights out of this kick. And it's a drum that I made. It's pretty simple. You've got like, if I take the tops off here, that's like the generated waveform that I've got, and then I've got these samples over the top of it. So, doing a little bit of drive on it. Actually it sounds all right even at like higher volumes, but when it comes to, I've got the distortion off, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I've got. I add a little bit of harmonics to it, not a lot. I mean, we're talking a very minuscule amount. If you add, that's what you can, and the nice thing about kicks is this plugin is you can see what, I always struggled with kicks, and it's very nice to see kind of like a visual representation of what's happening to the waveform, and this does a really good job of that. So like, what are harmonics? Okay, well, harmonics, like here's like your most basic sine wave here. If you just solo this, that's the body of the kick, right? If you add harmonics, if you go full harmonics, it's basically really tampering with the waveform there. But you can just add a touch of harmonics, you can back off of that. Because you don't want it to be like, that's not gonna translate for a kick. You could use it for something else, but I still want it to be a pretty punchy kick, but you can back off those harmonics and it still adds a little touch of character, but not too much, you know? So you can see the waveforms kind of getting a little wobbly there, but yeah, that's it. The limiter on this is actually quite nice. You can really like push it. I didn't do it for this track, but you can make some magic happen with that. I've got like such minimal compression on there. And then I was playing around with the Ableton drum bus. And I always tell people you got to be careful with this boom, but it's pretty cool. Got a little bit of drive on the kick, and put it on, I switched it to mono to make sure that it was just a mono signal. And something, let's see. Hans, good to see you. Don't be sorry. You have to eat, and I'm always eating, so don't feel bad about coming late here. You can come and go as you please. There's no rules like that. Interesting. This is from Keon. And Hans, I'll come back to your question once I answer Keon's. Keon asked, it would be interesting to know if you do any processing on the master, like slight saturation to glue things together. In general, Keon, I don't. Here's something I was doing for a while. This was a tip given by a friend. I think it might have been Perk, maybe, I don't know. But I thought he was crazy for saying this at first. You're probably looking at this and you're like, why the hell does this guy have 3 limiters on the master bus? And obviously, whenever I'm sending it off to mastering, I'm backing off pretty significantly on the volume, and I turn off all the mastering and whatnot. But when I was testing this track out, the reason I have 3 Ableton limiters here is this was a theory of his, and I think it actually, in my opinion, it does sound better. Like if you've got 3 very, like, let me just turn off the solo here. So I'm barely touching the limiter on each one. And normally I was doing that with 1 limiter. But instead I'm like, you can see that it's barely limiting that. And then I do it again. And then I do it again. So I'm basically just slightly limiting 3 times there. I've got a little bump on the EQ there that I kept on before I sent it to mastering, because that's kind of the way I wanted it to feel. Saturation on the master channel, you can do it, but I think there's like some nice, here's a good tape saturator. There's a big sale going on at Waves right now. You could probably get this for next to nothing, but this little tape saturator can sound really nice. You just don't want to go too hard on it, you know? And I would put that before the limiter, obviously. But yeah, just playing around with the level, the in and out level, you can get some really nice effects with that. That's the J37 Stereo Master. I think with like the coupon code that they have, it's like if you put Creative 40 as the coupon code, I would think you could get this thing for like $20 or something. So that's a nice tape saturator that I've played around with quite a bit. This question's from Hans Goethe. I think I'm saying that right. Good to see you, Hans. Would it be a problem to work with basic drums? Do you systematically group the drum parts or other parts? I saw you spoke about high end, doing loads of high and not destroying phase according to you. What about hats? Sorry if you already answered these questions. Thanks in advance. Hans, I did answer a lot of these questions, and this video I will upload this video to YouTube. I know that when I later learned that Facebook, they kind of degrade the quality of the replay of the stream, and this will be uploaded in full quality to YouTube on my YouTube channel. If somebody could share the YouTube channel in the comments. That would be great. Ben Perry with drum bus. If you put it on a group of drums, do you ever hear transients start to smear or flam a bit? Or is it just me? Mostly on hi-hats above the 10K range. Yeah, so I don't generally, I haven't used the drum bus a whole lot in general, but so I'm not the best person to ask with that. But in general, any type of plugin like this, moderation's always going to be key. Anytime I get a new plugin like this, I always overdo it. Because every plugin, I can't say this about Ableton, but like the third-party plugins, every time a new plugin rolls out, it's presented as this game changer. And spoiler alert, it's not. It's not a game changer. It's another tool to work with. And some of these tools are really nice. Like every once in a while, there is a game changer. For me, like the Fab Filter stuff really changed the way I worked. For me, like Echo Boy Sound Toys plugins changed the way I worked. But overall, plugins are just another tool. And the tendency is when these new plugins come out is I just go ham on them and I overdo it. And then it sounds in that moment, because it's new, it sounds good. But then I test it in a club, or I let the track sit on my hard drive for 2 weeks, and then I go back and listen to it and I'm like, oh, this is so not good. So keep that in mind. A lot of these things just aren't a panacea. And that's really important to remember. But the drum bus is pretty cool. I find that the boom can get out of hand really quick. Same with the drive, but it's pretty cool. And then there's a transient shaper there, and I haven't messed around with it too much, but we're checking. So yeah. So Hans, back to your question real quick. I don't always systematically group the drum part. So in this case, like the hi-hats and stuff, I tend to usually group the bass and the kick. And I'm using sometimes I use this API compressor, and this compressor, the input's really hot on it, so I'm just having this light barely come on here. I've got the attack at 30, I've got the release at like 100 milliseconds, and ratio at 4. You have like the old, new. You can just play around with stuff like that. One thing I like about the API compressor, and this for those that don't know API, they're a hardware company that's then been emulated, and this compressor in hardware form is one of the most legendary compressors out there, and it costs the price of a used car. So for people like me, the plugin is a great alternative. And one of the things that I like about the API compressor is you have this like legendary compressor, and the settings are insanely general. Every other compressor, you have the ability to play around with 1 millisecond on the release, and you can go into such detail. Whereas here, this super famous compressor exists, and it says, do you want 50 milliseconds? Do you want 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds? This is a $2,600 compressor, I think. I think it might be even more than that in the hardware format. And it gives you pretty much 3 options that you're ever going to use on the drum compression. Ratio, same deal. Attack, same deal. It's just a very general, it's a very basic compressor, and it's so that's a little lesson for me, that like all of these little details, some of the best tools don't offer as much flexibility as some of the other tools do. Yeah, the low end rumble is coming from the bass mostly. It's like I layered this, and that's basically a filtered down version of this. I just wanted to be able, I had to look and make sure, but these are the same exact synth that are just EQ'd differently. I rolled off the low frequencies on this. So I wanted to be able to mix the bass sound completely separate in this. And that's why I did that. Yeah, same goes for all gear, honestly. Okay. Let's see. I see that you have sonar work. What do you think of it? I like it. One thing to consider with the SonarWorks plugin is every set of headphones has their own personality. So you might have 100 Sennheiser HD25 headphones, and they could all be, there could be a plus or minus 10 dB range, or let's just say a 10 dB range with 50 hertz. Within just, if all those headphones, those same model of headphones came off the same assembly line, there can be a 10 dB variance of any given frequency. So the thing where SonarWorks really comes alive is, and I'll show what it's doing here. Let me pull this up. The thing where SonarWorks really comes to life, if you want to make it really maximize its potential, here's the general profile of the headphones that I'm using. Here's the curve, and here's what it looks like when it's adjusted, and the blue line is the before curve. And that's just an average of all the Beyerdynamic 880 Pro headphones that they've analyzed. But SonarWorks really comes to life whenever you get your own headphones calibrated through them, and then you get that calibration profile with the software, and you can, I mean, they sell their own headphones there as well, or you can send off your actual pair of headphones to get calibrated by them. And it's not cheap, but if you're a bedroom, like if you are in a situation where you have to always produce in headphones, it can be a really nice option. Still cheaper than studio monitors. Any other questions that we have? Concerns? I will head over to Twitch just for a little bit after this. Feel free to join in on that. And also there is on Twitch, I've got a Twitch, and I've started a Discord server. And the Discord server is a kind of nice thing where people kind of chime in. It's pretty much like an old school message board. And I would also post that for all of you to be able to enjoy. The only criteria is to not be a jerk on there. And you can ask questions, you can post stupid stuff, you can do whatever, just do it in a way that, you know, it's got this this, when it's a chat room that has my name on it, I want to make sure that it's accountable and above reproach, so to speak. So feel free to join in on that. Feel free to join in on Twitch. I'm gonna pull up some sessions and just shoot the breeze with people on there. And so that'll be our little after party that I'll load up just now. If there's no other questions, then we will conclude it. I'll wait a little bit to see if there's any other questions. And I will get the Twitch stream going. Questions, questions, questions. Drew, no problem. Good to see you. All right, I think that's it. Let me know, just send me a message if you have questions. Again, if you've got tracks that you're working on and you're stuck on something, or you have an issue that wants to be addressed, I'm gonna be picking some tracks it's not a contest, it's just really an issue of if I feel like the question would be relevant to a wider audience, and then I can go from there. I can get the session from you and pull it up and pull up your track in the middle of class and give a little insight on the issue that you're having. Okay? All right. Thanks a lot. Much love. See you soon.